Washington warned that excluding religious principles from education and students would result in a loss of morality. Statistics now confirm the accuracy of his warning. Consider the category of pregnancies for unwed teenage girls. For decades prior to 1962-63, birth rates for unwed teen girls had remained relatively stable. But with the court's exclusion of religious principles from students, birth rates for unwed teenage girls immediately skyrocketed by 400%. Similarly, birth rates for junior high girls had also been low. But following the court's removal of religious principles, pregnancies for girls ages 10 through 14 shot up by 460%. America now has the highest teen pregnancy rate of any nation in the industrialized world. Sexually transmitted diseases among students also reached previously unrecorded highs. Notice how low the rates had been. Notice the point where religious principles were removed, and look at the dramatic increase that followed. Strikingly, moral measurements for students broke violently in the wrong direction following the court's 1962-63 policy of enforced secularism. This is a strong correlation. Perhaps it's merely coincidental, but it certainly is clear and striking. Consider the next category in which public policy long maintained the use of biblical principles, the category of our parents, that is, our families. What happened with the exclusion of biblical principles? Consider the area of marital stability. According to federal statistics, the divorce rate had been steadily declining for years and even decades prior to 1962-63. But then notice what happened. Religious principles were excluded from public policy and the divorce rate skyrocketed. Suddenly, the United States found itself #1 in the world in the divorce rate. Similarly, the number of single-parent families also exploded, reaching almost triple its previous level, and unmarried couples living together increased tenfold, soaring by over 1,000%. In fact, having now excluded biblical principles, some American policymakers even became confused about how to define something as simple as marriage. Was it to remain the union of a man and a woman, or should it become that of a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or 5 men and a woman, or vice versa? Or is it perhaps an older man and an adolescent girl, or any of the other possible combinations? What remarkable changes have occurred since biblical values were excluded from public policies on the family. The third category over which God's assistance had been petitioned in that unconstitutional prayer was our teachers, that is, our schools. What happened when God and biblical principles were barred from our schools? One excellent indicator is the SAT test, the Scholastic Aptitude Test, an academic test for college-bound high school students that has been used in America since 1926. Prior to 1962-63, SAT scores bounced around the same general level and had been stable for decades. But following the removal of God from education, scores plummeted year after year after year after year. Other school-related statistics showed similar adverse changes. Consider finally the fourth category, that of our country, or the nation. Just from a common sense perspective, what do you think will happen when a policy is adopted that says, you can't see the 10 Commandments, things like don't steal and don't kill? You might obey them. We can't have that. Logic dictates that to exclude such principles and values will affect behavior. Apparently it did. In fact, George Washington, in yet another remarkable insight from his excellent farewell address, accurately predicted what has now occurred.
Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert?
Washington warned that if the sense of religious obligation were separated from the public arena, that there would be no security for life or property, the very things most often touched by violent crime. In America, violent crime had remained stable for decades, but following the removal of religious principles, violent crime soared over 470%, with the United States becoming the world's leader in crimes committed. There are many additional examples of marked changes in national statistical measurements following 1962-63. Significantly, the founders understood that America could prosper only under God's blessings and therefore refused to separate His principles from any aspect of public affairs.